What's up, guys? Stage 18 Tour de France. We're going to break it down right now. And if you were watching it and you're thinking, man, this is going to be an amazing stage, and then you got to the end and you were like, that stage was not what I was expecting. Well, you're probably like all of us, but I'm going to break it down exactly what happened in the stage and why it didn't look as spectacular as it could have looked, and what really contributed to the different things, and what performances were spectacular, and where we should give credit where credit is due. Because I do think there were some amazing things that perhaps people did not see out there that we're going to talk about. First off, though, if you're blaming the lack of explosion on the last climb, that's mainly due to the really hard first part of the stage, then the long downhill into the valley, the flat valley, and then the short gradual start to the Col de Los. This is why I think if you were a GC favorite, you ended up in that valley floor. After all the battling that we saw, this is why you got there with tired legs, an already kind of nullified GC fight at this point, and then not really the most ideal terrain to kind of start a big fight up on the bottom of the final climb. The climb really just kind of built on itself, and with the amount of fatigue that the riders had, the racing that they've been doing in this Tour de France, if you look, like 10th place on GC is almost 1 hour behind. And so it's been a gnarly race. The legs are so shot at this point. And the way they raced the first part of the stage, they raced for everything in that part of the stage that in the final, the legs just weren't there. The course wasn't hard enough. And it was just kind of this slow death march to the last part of the climb, which was the best part of the climb, which was where all the action would play out. We'll talk about here in a little bit. But first off, I want to talk about Visma. I've been kind of hard on them on this podcast, rightfully so. I think that they ultimately ended their bid for the Tour de France in the first 12 days, the chance they had at the victory at least, with the scorched to earth tactic, which go basically pull out the machine gun everywhere they could shoot. They shot with all of their riders, including their leader, throwing attacks every possible place, and not really being specific about where they're putting their effort in, and if that section that they're putting the effort in really favored their lead rider, Jonas Vingegaard. So we go into this stage 18. They put everything on the Col de Madeleine. They light this climb up so intensely. After sitting back, they put Matteo Jorgensen in the break. They sat back the majority of the stage up until that point. UAE set the pace on the climb prior to that. And they get on this Col de Madeleine. They light it up. Victor Kampernet's incredible performance. I remember tuning this, on my TV, tuning in, and just seeing him pulling on the front, and there was only 22 or something like this riders left, and he is just accelerating. Incredible pace performance from him. Then we saw Simon Yates take over. He did a really great pull. This is what they were missing the other day on the Ventoux. He did a phenomenal job. Then into Sepp Kuss. Sepp lit it up, raised the pace, and got the riders pretty far up the Madeleine. And then Jonas attacked. He only had to do 2 minutes of work in the wind with Tadej on the wheel before he got to Matteo Jorgensen, caught him right before the top of the climb, and then Matteo set the pace all the way to the top of the climb. So their strategy with this, intense climb was simply to put massive pressure on everyone in the race, which they did. Pretty much we saw cracks from all types of riders. We saw Healy out. He's out of the GC. We saw Vauquelin. He's struggling. He was dropped. Eventually, we saw everyone dropped except for Tadej. Now, the pressure that Jonas put after the team, or with the team, and then his attack after the team let him out, that was solely focused on Tadej to see, hey, how are we inside there? And he's got to try something like this, because you never know. And in the back of Tadej's mind, he's questioning the stage. He's questioning, he lost the Tour de France on this stage before, or the climb that's coming up on the stage. He is afraid of this. And, Visma puts all their effort on this climb to check and see if he has it. Now, the reason for this check is honestly to see if whether or not they can win the Tour de France, because they are in second place. Now, if he comes to the line with Tadej, Jonas is not winning the stage. So the options that Visma has at this point, and this is important for listeners to hear here, is to check and see if the winning the Tour is an option. And if it's not, buckle down on second place. I don't think that's a crazy ask. And I like this strategy so much more than the machine guns into the dark forest everywhere approach. And hopefully we take Tadej out. It's calculated. It's one moment. And there was a lot of bailout plans if it didn't work. Mainly, he's got his teammate across at the top, and he's attacking on a climb that's so far from the finish that Tadej's not going to counter him. And so he's checking to see, Tadej, how are you? How are you, man? Tadej's good. Okay, that's it. And if you watch the stage, like literally, that's what happened. He did it. Jonas went. He did a super fast effort, ripped it to pieces. Tadej's on the wheel. You can see Tadej's breathing hard. Tadej's better than Jonas. This is not crazy. This is not a disappointment. This is, we've been checking for 18 stages. Tadej's still better than Jonas. He's had a cold. He's had a crash. He's lost his teammates. Everything's been thrown at him. He's still there. He's still the best rider. He's going to win the Tour de France. We're going to try to beat him, and you're trying. But we're doing it in a calculated, methodical way, which I like. And read on the internet, everyone's criticizing, and they're saying, Visma, what are you doing? It's like you're trying, and then you're not trying it. Well, I'm laying it out for all you people that's wondering what they're doing. Calculated, one shot, one hit. Tadej's okay. Reset. Get to the finish line. Try to not lose any time. Maybe take a shot or two close to the line so there's not that much room to lose time in the end. And then regroup and try tomorrow. That's all you can do. But I love this strategy because, again, it was really focused, it's really calculated, and it had a solution if it didn't work. Now, scorched the earth tactics, that doesn't have a bailout if it doesn't work. If Jonas throws an attack and Tadej decides to counter it near the finish line, he's gone. And you could see at the end of this stage, Jonas did indeed throw an attack, but it wasn't an all-out attack. It wasn't his best attack possible. I think he had tired legs as well, but he still left a lot in reserve for Tadej to go over the top of him, try to keep up with him. But Onley was able to follow the Tadej attack. The Jonas attack. So we know that he did protect himself from getting dropped by too much in the end. Is he racing for second place? Yeah. I mean, in the media, no, I'm here to win. Nothing wrong with second in the Tour. It's a massive result. Sponsors pay for it. You're on TV. You're throwing attacks. You did a phenomenal Ventoux. You're on TV the entire climb. You're the hero. Tons of attacks, tons of pace setting. Set the record on Ventoux. Just looked absolutely phenomenal on the Ventoux. Like, there's nothing wrong with this degree of racing, in my opinion. And if you're the second best rider in the race and you finish second place, then awesome. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I've been second best racer all the time in races, and I race my heart out for second place. We all want to win. We all want to get to that top step, but sometimes we're just not as good. And the thing that I love the most about today's strategy and the Ventoux strategy is that Jonas is in the race with Tadej, and he's raising his level to the level of Tadej. And we can talk about this after the Tour de France, but I wouldn't say that it's a bad thing for Jonas to sign up for more races with Tadej and just keep going head to head with him until you get even closer. Because racing against him and then going away for a year and then coming back and then guessing how you're going to beat him with the same thing that you used 2 or 3 years ago, it's not a good strategy. You need to race against this guy. You need to learn what he's doing, how he's making changes, make those changes, keep trying, keep showing up. You're going to get there eventually. And probably you guys the same thing, but I'm loving the Jonas that I'm seeing. He's more muscular, he's stronger, he's got more power, his technique looks amazing, his facial expressions, his confidence, his breathing, like the way he's calculating his efforts. I love everything about the new version of Jonas that we're seeing in 2025. Way better than last year that was super skinny and extremely fast, but not nearly as powerful and as secure in this last week of the Tour de France. Way better than 2023, 2022, 2021. I'll do some posts where I'll talk about the differences, but as Jonas has evolved and as Tadej is evolved, I think that would be really interesting to talk about, watch it a lot, about it a lot internally and cinch with my group. There's some really cool stuff that they're doing. Really want to talk about those things, but that's for another podcast. But bottom line, Jonas looks awesome. I like the tactics of Visma today. It didn't work. That's okay. We're still in second place. We did a great race today. He was really strong. We're going to try again tomorrow. No harm, no foul. Let's go. Move on. Okay. So let's talk about one mistake that I think Visma made. So overall strategy, I think, was good. But the Matteo Jorgensen kind of covering that Ben O'Connor attack in the valley there. Ultimately, I think that took the wind out of the sails of that moment. If you think about the GC riders and what they went through on the Madeleine, Jonas attacks, he goes across to Matteo. Matteo sets the pace. They attack on the downhill. Everything's hot and heavy. They're very focused on each other, Tadej and Jonas. And then they just kind of, come to the standstill. It turns into an amateur race in the valley. And they stop working with one another. There's all these attacks from riders that aren't even on GC that are going for the stage. Rightfully so. They need to get away from these GC homies if they want a shot at the stage. And we saw that with Ben O'Connor. But then Matteo just tags on the back of this. And now Jonas is isolated, and he's isolated with the man in yellow. And so the man in yellow, he's already shown that dude, like, I'm just going to follow you. And the man in yellow, Tadej, he had his team riding on the front for the stage win earlier in the stage. And then the yellow team, or the black, whatever, Visma homies ripped the race apart, dropped the yellow guy's teammates. And now he's in this valley all by himself with his arch rival. They're stuck in this valley of death here. He's not happy about this. And he's like paralyzed because he can't go for the stage win because he doesn't have anyone to chase. You have one guy to chase. I think if you wanted any sort of collaboration with the man in yellow, Tadej Pogačar, you probably would keep Matteo there and at least ride the pace, keep this like intense competition mindset going, and bring that gap, at least get those two riders by themselves to the base of that climb, and then maybe they'll start attacking each other. Maybe they'll start riding and they'll start working together. Who knows exactly what they're going to do, but at least that would have been a better scenario than Matteo Jorgensen just following this attack by Ben O'Connor, going up the road. He's not as strong as Ben O'Connor. He's not as strong as Rubio. He doesn't had the best legs that we've seen of those people in the front group. At this point, like, are we switching to trying to go for a stage? Are you at any sort of use going up the road and Jonas bridges to you? Probably not at this point. Everyone's absolutely blown. And so what the GC riders do is they sit there, they wait for their teammates. They wait a long time for their teammates. I think the teammates were like 3.5 minutes down or something like this. At this point, can you imagine just after being so hot and heavy with this big attack, all these big efforts, just sitting there? I've done this before where it's almost kind of like, we're going to just do a complete reset. And it's tough to do a reset in the middle of a hard race like this after two really hard climbs. And after one climb when your opponent literally pummeled you and your team on this, all across this climb. So I think that was one mistake from Visma. Did it cost them any sort of result? No. I think maybe just Jonas could have had a better final climb. Maybe he could have done some better attacks or something like this. I don't know. But it just kind of looked not that great from a visual standpoint. And I think tactically it probably would have been better to just keep the two people together. Also, if Jonas had some kind of problem mechanically, it would have been good to just have a teammate there to help him in the valley get back to Tadej. I just think, again, that's just crazy. If you've got your team there, you've done all this work, your guys there, you've kind of started this giant big fight with the man in yellow, the guy is better than you, and your teammate just pieces out and says, hey, dude, I'm going to go up the road. I don't think that was the best move. All right, so let's move on. Let's talk about Tadej. We talked about Jonas. Visma looked really good. I think they did a good job. Tadej, how did he look? Tadej looked amazing. He looked super strong, and he looked like an absolute stone-cold killer. And I think we're just not really used to this new absolute sniper version of Tadej. We're kind of used to this fun, playful guy that's willing to risk it for the biscuit, wants to be on TV, wants to put on a show. He's kind of like just closed up a little bit, and he's a little bit more aggro, honestly. And so it's like he does the race. I think he wanted to win the race. He had his team riding on the front. He probably would have ridden them the entire stage and tried to keep it together to win the stage. I think he was looking to win the stage with his last explosive effort. Like, he took time on Jonas. I think he wasn't looking to put blood all over the road, spend a ton of energy. I think he still has a lot of respect for the race, a lot of respect for Jonas, and he's trying to keep and manage his 4-minute lead. But I think he would have ridden for the stage win had he been able to keep his team. That's what he said in the interview afterwards. I think it looked that way. But once the team was blown out of the water, he didn't really have his team, and they had to wait and give O'Connor such a big gap in that valley. And then when they did catch, he wanted, rightfully so, he wanted the Visma homies to do some work. Didn't want to just put his riders directly on the front because he had his climbers there. He wanted to keep them there for the climb. Visma is the one that technically should pull, right? Because they started the whole shit and all of this. And then Florian Lipovitz comes and he attacks him, and he's going up the road. And technically, he's going over the second place of Jonas. And so therefore, putting pressure on the Visma folks to ride is a good plan. But let's talk about why I think Tadej is the stone cold killer now, and why he is not putting on this massive show. Well, I think there's a few different things that have happened to him over the course of this race that has really changed his perspective on what it takes or what he needs to win this race. The first thing would be, the crash of Almeida. I think that he had an amazing teammate in Almeida, and that little extra bit where he had a rider that was almost as good as him, or at least almost as good as Jonas on the climbs, and could put down such a vicious and savage pace that he could then attack and fly away on, or this rider could control pretty much any mountain scenario and keep the gaps closed. So they could go and take some stage wins along the way. And I think once he lost this weapon of his, he realized, especially in the first mountain stages, that he's missing that last piece. He was able to make do in the mountain stages and sort of manage them the best possible. But he is really, really looking for, I think, to have that little bit more mountain protection and in Almeida. And I think he's felt that over the last stages, where it's like, man, there's all these killer bees buzzing around. And I'm looking for one of my guys, and no one's really there. And so, Adam Yates is pretty close, but he's really kind of tapped out if he is there. And if he's not there, he's not really coming back anytime soon. So I think that Almeida piece is a big reason why he is more controlled, more calculated, and really waiting to use his energy only and absolute kill shots without taking any risk. The next thing is he got sick. He talked about it a little bit now because I think he's on the tail end side of it. But there was an illness that went through the team. The team was compromised. I think some of the riders like Sivakov is still struggling from this particular illness. We saw Tadej talk about having stuffed up nose and you could hear that he's congested. I think that's for him. Anytime you get that level of cold or an illness in the Grand Tour, like even though it's not a massive performance decreaser, you still just don't feel good. Your head is kind of pounding. When you're off the bike, when you're on the bike, you feel just a little bit spacey, even more spacey than you do at this point in the tour. You're not sleeping as well. Your recovery is just a little bit off. Your muscles are a little bit more achy and kind of crunchy. There's just those feelings where you normally just kind of have that edge when you go into the race. And I think just having that little bit of lack of the edge that you're looking for, I think, takes away that playfulness, and kind of you're almost kind of like, let's just get through this. I've done a lot of Grand Tours with colds. It's pretty common, actually. But yeah, it definitely takes away from that edge, and you just feel like you're just waiting for the race to kind of end. You're like, I don't really know how well I'm going to do today. I just want to get through it. I want to perform my best, but I'm just not feeling that excited to ride my bike, let alone attack and race my bike. So I think that's a piece of it. And then his own crash, I think he saw that he can crash too. And that crash could have been really bad. I think most people would have broken a collarbone with that type of crash where you get that front wheel cleaned out. We saw Roglic crash similar to this and leave the Tour de France a few years ago, same type of thing. So even though he played it down, he still has the bandages on his arms. Whether or not he's still feeling the effects of the crash, probably not, but I think it definitely humbled him quite a bit. And again, I think he's just saying, look, like, I'm not messing around. Like, I'm going to use the minimum amount of energy. I don't know what's coming around the next corner. I've had a crash. I've had illness. I've had my teammate leave. I'm feeling maybe a little bit more respectful of how crazy this race is. And maybe whereas before I felt like I was very playful in the race and I really enjoyed the race chaos, I think now I'm just looking to get through the race and move past it. So those are the reasons why I think Tadej is more controlled and more of a stone cold killer out there. He did still attack in the very end. We can talk about him covering the moves of Jonas. I think he easily, again, covered all the moves of Jonas. I would say that, he didn't necessarily do anything cocky too. Like, he would cover them, but he would still stay behind. When I'm coaching my athletes in cinch, I always talk about this. When someone attacks or someone pulls hard on the front, you don't want to come alongside of them and egg them on, or you don't really want to show them anything. You just kind of want to sit back there and let them play it out how they want to play it out. And the reason for this is a lot of times, you can get in their head where they might think that they're doing damage, and they might, go start grinding for 10 minutes, 15 minutes on the climb, and then at one point start to feel the fatigue, start to feel tired, start to feel weak, and look back and see you there, like, totally quiet. They don't know anything about you. It can mess with you. At the same time, if you just let them do their thing up front, a lot of times people will get into their own rhythm. You could figure out their rhythm from behind, and you can adjust and get used to their rhythm. And if you don't disrupt their rhythm, a lot of times they won't attack you again. We saw this with Jonas today, and even on Ventoux, he only really threw 4 attacks. A normal protocol, if you are in a battle with someone on a climb, a normal race situation that you would do is you would slow way down and then throw a massive attack and try to drop them, and then slow way down and then throw a massive attack, slow, like something like that. Whereas Jonas kind of threw 1 attack, went back to his pace, another attack, went back to his pace, another attack, went back to his pace. So, how much of that was really designed to drop Tadej? Probably not a whole lot. Probably most of it was, I'm going to ride my pace. I'm going to go as fast as I can from start to finish. If you can keep up, you can keep up. If not, I'm going to win. If you do, you're better than me, like I already knew. So something like this. So again, sitting behind the person just kind of encourages them to ride their pace. And when you ride up alongside someone, a lot of times you'll irritate them. You'll maybe churn that fire a bit more, and they'll start just throwing massive attacks or whatever it is. Just sitting behind like Tadej did today, you just let that person do what they want to do. You see exactly what they got, and you're not showing them anything. So I thought what Tadej did, staying behind him, not riding alongside, not being cocky, not looking at him, not talking shit, not, these things happen in the races. And so I thought he was super classy and put together and did a really good job of that. Jonas threw an attack close to the finish. Tadej was straight on him. You saw almost like some irritation with him between a fan. Tadej kind of put his hand up. I would say that level of, I went back and watched that clip and saw, like, did the fan hit him or anything like that? I think that was just that, like, fire mindset that Tadej had in that moment. And I think he was just, like, again, in that kill mode, and is like, I sense the finish line, guys. Like, get out of my way, fans out of my way, people out of my way, Jonas out of my way. Like, I do finish lines, and I do them well, He got to 500 meters, did his crazy seated attack. Important here is Jonas made it 17 seconds. So if we go back and we look at Ventu and we look at all the races before where Tadej did the standing attack for 15 seconds and then stopped, Jonas was dropped, and then he came back. This time, Tadej went a few seconds longer. He uses the seated attack so he can get close to that standing power, but then he makes it like 30 seconds or a minute long or even 2 minutes long. In this case, it was a minute and 20 seconds long to the top. Tadej did this acceleration. Jonas lasted 17 seconds. All right, folks. And so that's right on par with all the other races. If you look at the Dauphiné, if you look at the let's see, the mountaintop finish that Tadej won here, he basically Jonas made it like 17 seconds on the wheel. And Hautacam. I lost my train of thought there. So if you saw in Hautacam, Jonas 17 seconds. This is what he can maintain, this power, and after that he has to go much closer to his threshold power. Tadej can keep going. This is why he does it seated, because he can use his strength that he already has. It's not as much power as he does standing, but he can do it for longer, and that is what breaks Jonas right now. I can guarantee you after this Tour de France, Jonas is going to go back and work on that seated longer, or maybe even standing longer power acceleration in his attack. But once Tadej got the gap, he rode away. What also struck me that was impressive with Tadej's attack was the incredible high cadence on like 17, 18, 20% gradient of the climb. Now, guys, that is really hard to do. And if you saw Rubio, he like passed him like he was a person walking with a cane, right? Like, this guy's racing for second on the stage, and Tadej blasted past him with the super high cadence, ripping up the climb. If you look back at Jonas's cadence was lower. So Jonas also was quite a bit depleted at the end of the stage. So the fact, whether or not, a depleted Jonas or a full of glycogen Jonas probably wouldn't have been able to make this acceleration anyway. But from what happened at that point, Tadej also kind of slowed down and fanned it towards the finish line. I think Tadej could have stood up and sprinted all the way to the line and got 30 seconds or something like this on this climb. But you look back, he stayed seated. He kept looking back in his over his shoulder and seeing Jonas just behind, kind of struggling to get back on terms. Fanned, managed it well, wins a stage, gets second on the stage, gets a time bonus, gets 2 seconds there, 9 seconds gap at the finish line, moves the gap close to 4.5 minutes at this point, really with just a handful of stages to go, one more mountain stage tomorrow. So stone cold killer, Tadej Pogačar, definitely looking like the winner of the Tour de France at this point. We know Jonas is going to throw it at him again tomorrow. Hope Tadej gets a stage win. I think at this point, Tadej is probably a little frustrated with the situation, both with his team not being able to control it for the stage win, and him just whatever with the luck, and with the team, Jonas and those guys not riding it closer for the stage win. I think he could really use help from everybody to get the stage win. So hopefully there's a charity out there, stage win for Tadej tomorrow, get that last mountain victory. Oscar Onley, I think we got to talk about him. Amazing performance. He was dropped on the Madeleine. He had a sizable gap that he was behind. He was behind Lipovitz, and then Roglic was in the breakaway ahead. We're going to talk about the Red Bull drama after this, but Onley looked awesome. He stayed within himself. He managed the gap. He did the best job he could possibly do. He had teammates that he got in touch with that helped chase him back in the race. And then on the final climb, he was right there with Jonas all the way to the finish line. So amazing performance from this guy. He's sitting 4th overall. He almost moved on to the podium today. Halfway through the stage, if someone had pulled out a microphone and interviewed him, he was looking like he was going to drop to 5th on this in the GC. Someone, interviewed him in that moment and said, dude, what do you think? How's your Tour de France outcome? He'd say, it's shitty. I'm losing my top 4 place overall. I thought maybe I had a shot at 3rd, and now I'm out the butt of this race. Like, what the heck? I hate this race. And then if you interviewed him at the finish, again, I saw on Instagram, he posted this picture of him and Jonas and Tadej in the final, and he's like, dude, I would have never believed this if you showed me this. He did it. He is one for the future, 100%. If you look at him, there's a lot of cool things you could clean up with his technique and his performance and his power. He's definitely going to be able to close that gap closer to Jonas, I think, in the future, and at least to that level that Jonas is at this race. So look for him as a star of the future. Look for him maybe on the podium in Paris, although I think that Lipovitz is still going to hang on. A lot of the problems that Lipovitz had in the end today were his own fault. So I think he's going to clean that stuff up tomorrow. Regardless, Onley, awesome Tour de France, going to finish top 5 overall, most likely 4th. And so hats off to this young guy. Really excited about him and pumped to see him up there. So let's move on to Red Bull tactics. Again, this is another one on the internet that people are like, this Red Bull team, absolutely horrible tactics today. Now, I'm going to go against the internet, and I'm going to say I don't think the Red Bull tactics were that bad. They didn't work out. They backfired, but that's not always the fault of your tactics. You also have to take into effect the other people, what they did in the race and what ended up happening. And in this case, the Red Bull tactics, for the most part, worked, except for the other people in the race. They were put into a different situation, and that reversed what the Red Bull guys did. But putting Roglic in that early move, I think that early move should have gone all the way to the finish lane with Jorgensen. I think Jorgensen messed that up by him, not staying with Jonas, going ahead. And so normally he would have pulled that Roglic group up, and I think at the end, Lipovitz was still holding pretty close. I think in the end, we would have had a really close Roglic and Lipovitz going into the final mountain stage, and I think that guarantees a Red Bull homie on the podium. And I don't think that, if you're sitting here, and I know if we're a Lipovitz fan, which I am, I think he's riding awesome, and I'm impressed with his performance. But if you're, Red Bull manager, and you're like, hey, this new guy is in the podium of the Tour de France, and there's this like older guy we spend $4 million a year that eats podiums of Grand Tours for breakfast, putting him in position to get on the podium isn't really that bad of a guarantee to make sure that Red Bull gets on the podium in the Tour de France, which Red Bull puts millions and millions of dollars into cycling, and they haven't for years or at all into road cycling. Or World Tour road cycling. So, here we are. Like, this is, I think, a business marketing and a good backup plan. Now, if you're a Lipovitz camp, and I am, you're bummed because you're like, hey, dude, like, you're supposed to be back there with your man, and you're up here. You're maybe even taking his GC spot. Like, we know you're good in this last, part of the Grand Tour, but dude, how many wins do you have in these Grand Tours? How many podiums do you have? How many Vuelta wins? How many Giro wins? How many Tour podiums? Like, dude, just give one to your buddy Lipovitz. That's what we're thinking. But again, you got to think what's happening with, the managers, and I think, it's a good strategic move to put him in that move. Now, Lipovitz gets dropped from the Jonas group, and he's in no man's land. He had a good job chasing in no man's land, even though it cost him a lot of energy. He caught up to Arnsman and stayed close to those guys, and ultimately caught them as soon as they slowed down a little bit in the valley. And so had Jorgensen kept chasing or kept pulling, there's a good chance Lipovets probably would have caught that group anyway. And then you would have had Roglic and Lipovets, where based on the form, normally Roglic probably would have been further behind Lipovets. Maybe he would have been, in a smaller group behind and never would have seen that front group. So I thought that worked out. Now, we got the Lipovets attack in the valley. Well, now when everything slowed down, we see that the two big riders are waiting for their teams. They're not messing around. And Lipovets throws an attack. He goes after... I believe he went after O'Connor and let's see, the break that just went behind. So we had O'Connor, Rubio, and Jorgensen. And so Lipovets missed that, but he goes behind those guys. And I think that also was a good move. He could have potentially bridged up to them, even though he wasn't necessarily really gaining that much ground on him. It was possible. But most importantly, you don't know that those teammates of the big riders are going to catch back up. And so in that moment, sending him up the road like that and staying in his zones, not going all out, I think he used energy, but I don't necessarily think he went completely flat out. I think that would have potentially put him in the second place position, because normally a Tadej is not going to work with Jonas, and Jonas isn't going to pull Tadej through that valley and up that climb. And so if those teammates never caught that move, then Lipovets would have kind of ridden away with second place, or at least gotten really, really, really close to second place GC. Is that tactically the best move? Like if I'm the director of Red Bull and I'm on the phone with these guys and Lipovets asks if he should attack, I'd probably say no. But this guy likes to attack. He did it earlier in the race, and here we are in the last week. If you got it, you got to use it. He obviously has it, and this is his style of riding anyway. So I think that could have worked. I think he just got kind of screwed by the teammates catching back up. They waited a long time. And then, the teammates of both teams worked. Even Tadej put a rider in. I think he, again, thought maybe he could get closer to that stage win. But Ben O'Connor was too strong. But Lipovets, again, he stays in third, but he almost loses his third place because of this move. But he thought it was worth the risk. I would prefer not to make the risk, but I'm not going to say that was a bad tactic if you're trying to get that second place. So if he's trying to get that second place, that was the moment to get it right there. He almost got it. He got close to it. So, it ended up backfiring. Red Bull tactics didn't work out perfect. Didn't work out the exact way they wanted it, but I can see those plays. I think they were well thought out plays. I think that they could have worked. Good racing. And I can see both of those scenarios working and those riders winning big in the end. And what if Lipovets, got that second place GC in the Tour de France, went over Jonas? Like, that would be crazy town. So anyway, didn't work out, but not the worst tactics. Finally, let's talk about O'Connor. Really awesome ride from him. If you watch the race, normally I think anyone would have come back on that final climb, especially how hard that stage was. He is a podium Grand Tour pedigree. He is supposed to be up there in that group, battling for that top 5, battling for that podium. He was riding at the level that he's capable of riding at this Tour de France. And he looked really, really strong all the way to the finish line. He didn't really lose too much time. He definitely didn't lose any time when the favorites had their teammates chasing, which is impressive because, he spent a lot of time in the wind out on these big open roads. And those riders don't have to make it to the finish line. They just have to get the time gap down, and then they can sit up. What also is impressive is that, he got to that spot after having done lots of attacks, lots of bridges, lots of hard efforts. And so he still had a lot in the tank to do a good attack, good acceleration on Rubio, and rode away from everyone. Big time gap, really awesome performance. On the last steep parts of the climb, he still looked strong. He gave it all the way to the line. And so really nice stage win for him. Also great to see another stage win for Jayco. And someone mentioned to me that this is the first time in years that there aren't any riders other than Europeans in that top 10 GC. And so I think, like O'Connor and, an American like Jorgensen, there's no Colombian top 10 rider in there. I think there's some key countries that are missing. And today was a reminder just who should be in there. O'Connor, definitely amazing ride. Definitely something he's capable of. I hope he's doing the Vuelta. I hope he gets it together and puts together a good Vuelta. But he is another rider that watching him, there are some technique things he can improve on. There are some fitness stuff that he can build. There are some new potential new areas of potential that can be created that can really get him closer consistently to that podium, maybe even racing for the win in one of these Grand Tours. Obviously he was kind of racing for the win he was racing for the win in the Vuelta last year, but most of that was due to break, or he was able to add to his time through breakaways. And so I think he can become one of these guys that's always up there, that's always battling. And so it'll be fun to do some podcasts where we'll pull some of these athletes that are just outside the cusp and pick and kind of walk through the areas, compare and contrast them to Tadej and Jonas, who I think are setting the standards, setting the bar super high, what they're doing, talk about what they're doing, and then how these riders can close the gap. We'll talk about that. That'll be a fun podcast, but we still have some more stages. We got tomorrow's mountain stage. Definitely going to do a podcast on that. So thank you guys for listening. I hope it was somewhat enjoyable and informative. I did a hard ride after the race. I was so inspired. Again, I know a lot of people were not inspired, but I thought it was cool racing from both Jonas and Pogačar. I've been in both of their shoes before, and the way that they handled the race and the things that they've been thrown at them, I thought it was classy and really well played. So looking forward to tomorrow's stage. I'm sure Jonas is going to make it exciting. We'll watch, and I hope Tadej wins. I hope he gets the stage win that he deserves tomorrow and solidifies his Tour de France win. I'm a Tadej fan. I'm a Jonas fan. But, like I've said before on this podcast, I'm a big fan of the best rider winning. Doesn't always work out that way, but I think it should. And in this case, Tadej is the best rider. He's raced an incredibly classy, well-oiled, well-machined Tour de France, gone through all kinds of adversity, all kinds of challenge. He deserves a win. And Jonas, amazing performance. Visma really got it together the second half of this race. They're doing a great job. And they are truly they're the best team here for sure. And second best rider. So looking forward to seeing that battle tomorrow and talking about how it plays out here. So you guys have a good night. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.